This is the European edition of Breaking Banks, the world's #1 fintech podcast and radio show. We bring you the European unicorns, startups, founders, regulators, and leaders innovating the rapidly evolving fintech scene today. A truly localized podcast with both English and local language content, with some of the world's most well-known hosts and influencers in the fintech sector globally. Join us every week as we explore what makes the European Union a phenomenal proving ground for many of the fastest growing fintech plays in the world today. Okay, let's roll.
I'm here with Premier Oiwoh. Actually, it was a great re-encounter after many years. I've been missing going to Nigeria. Premier, welcome to this podcast.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me.
So tell us a little bit about your story and also about NIBSS, please.
Yeah, thank you. I'm the Managing Director CEO of NIBSS, Nigeria Bank Settlement Systems, and set up by over 31 years ago. And we have responsibility to lower cost of digital payment in Nigeria and transactions for the Nigerian banking industry. It is owned by the banks and the central bank. And we have some star products like the NIP, instant payments. We also have the platform called the NUS for POS transactions. And then we recently launched our first domestic card in Nigeria, national domestic card called the Afrigo, which is currently live and transacting. And we're very proud of it. And it's been positioned to solve a lot of local problems within Nigeria. So NIBSS is growing significantly. And we have about 1,000 connecting entities today, and we continue to grow, creating stability, creating faster transaction, and then also helping to lower cost of doing business. So that's pretty what NIBSS is all about.
You know why I love this conversation? Because, as you know, you are the SWIFT of Nigeria.
Yes.
Right?
We're the national switch.
Exactly, but also the SWIFT as the cooperative, because you have the same governance structure.
Yes.
You are also bank-owned. Mm-hmm. You are also about, you built an infrastructure that serves, the banking and the financial industry community. And I worked there for 13 years, so I know very well both the challenges and the opportunities. So, with the rise of fintech, okay, I suppose that you created an environment so that fintech startups and entrepreneurs can interact with NIBSS because, I suspect it's been a while, and I will make amend and come back to Nigeria because I should know this, right? But I am pretty sure that you set up an environment so that fintech can interact with you guys, right? Can you please tell us?
NIBSS is owned by all the banks and the central bank. And then for every participant in the Nigerian financial system licensed by the central bank, you are required to connect to NIBSS. So most of the fintechs that are licensed by the central bank connect to us. And at NIBSS, what do? We create platforms and create a bridge between players within the ecosystem, the fintechs and the bank. So there are lots of products like the bank verification number, which is also utilized by the fintechs. And then most of the products that have been hosted in the NIBSS, also the payment rails, are also utilized by the fintech to access the bank account, because fintechs are not allowed to hold deposits in Nigeria, but designed a lot of products and use cases for the Nigerian ecosystem. So at NIBSS, we're able to create a platform where anybody can come, utilize whatever services the organization requires.
Is it some sort of a sandbox?
Yes.
We could call it like this, right?
Yes, there's a sandbox for entities to test a lot of our products. And of course, we also have every quarter, we have a demo session where some fintechs showcase what they've done with our APIs. In terms of providing some great financial innovative activities within the Nigerian ecosystem. So we work hand in hand with the fintechs a whole lot.
And also you walk the talk, right? Because yes. Nigeria is, one of the poster childs for fintech in Africa. Yes. No? It has a degree of innovation. a density of startups, a richness of capital, and also a potential, right? For not just for the population, but for how many good entrepreneurs the ecosystem is providing, right? I mean, I'm pretty sure that in the past 10 years, or I want to say almost 15 years, which is what fintech, the age of fintech, more or less, you saw this growing a lot, right?
Yes. Within the past 10 years and almost on a daily basis, you see fintechs emerging on the scene. And as you know, Nigeria is the most populous black nation on earth with almost 250 million people. So it's a very big market on the African continent, and with a lot of smart individuals creating innovative products. If you recall, from about over 10 years ago, we sat down as a nation and created the bank verification number, which is the BVN. It hasn't been done by anybody in the world. We had to create something that has become a bedrock of all financial transfer in Nigeria today. You cannot own a bank account except you have the bank verification number. Or if you do have an NIN, then you open a tier 1 type of account. But if you need to upscale the kind of account, then you require a BVN. You also recall that Nigeria was the first nation to have developed the instant payment. And the instant payment was developed principally to address the needs of Nigerians. Addressing their needs, we don't have credit cards, or it's not as advanced as you have in the West, but Nigerians require instant credit. And the competition we have with digital payment is cash. And why do people love cash? Just principally because of the instant value it provides. That's why we went and developed the NIP, which was completely homegrown. There's something we just did recently with the Afrigo card that's just been launched, and most of the banks are embracing and so on right now. But we've become the first nation and the first card scheme to provide a T+0 value on POS transaction. That has not happened elsewhere, but being the first, because looking at our local environment, the merchants need instant cash or instant credit to enable them restock. The POS have not really scaled as much as we wanted because people still rely on cash because of the settlement delays of T+1 or T+2, depending on the case. But so what we've done recently and we've launched and has gone live is to create a T+0 on POS. So if I transact on POS right now using the Afrigo card, as I get my debit notification, the merchant is getting his instant credit notification. So we're going to see a huge adoption of POS and card-based payments in the days to come, hopefully.
I just literally came out from a panel when we were talking about the crossroads between the travel industry and fintech, and I was with one of the Revolut of Asia, is called U-Trip. And they were telling that, travelers are a great case to solve, that fintech can solve, because of course they are the ones who, they switch currencies, they have different point of payments, they all require instant settlement, etc., right? Now, you manage to solve this for the Nigerian ecosystem, and it's amazing because it's the largest, it's great. But the challenge of interoperability in between different countries, some, of course, they share, like Francophone Africa, for example, they share, the majority of them, the same central bank, the same currency, but it's still a fragmented market, right? How do you see this challenge to be solved over time?
Okay, I think the Afroism working via PAPS have already put in place a machinery through the MD Mike Ogbolu, who is the MD of PAPS, who have done tremendously very well in terms of trying to bring the 54 African nations together and facilitate payment in a very fast way and ensure interoperability across. And this will help enable cross-border payment within the African continent. There's a lot of trade activities going on in Africa. And what PAPS has been set up to do, which is Pan-African Payment Settlement Organization, is to ensure that a country can make, any individual in any country can make payment to anybody in another country, and then settlement occurs. So with what PAPS is doing right now, I mean, in Nigeria, NIBSS have connected, and a lot of other institutions have connected through NIBS to PAPS. And what that means that most Nigerian manufacturers who sell across border can actually receive payment right now or pay across. So I see that increasing cross-border activities within the African states, and also helping in terms of FATCA, the free trade agreement that has been signed by the African nations to help deepen commerce across the African continent. So I think PAPS have a responsibility to deepen this, and we see it increasing on a daily basis. And most of the central banks of the various countries in Africa are working together to ensure that this issue of settlement is dealt with. You're absolutely correct in terms of the regional blocks, and most of the regional regions are also working together to see how they can ease trade within the regions, and then perhaps we'll sort out the necessary issues at the Pan-African level.
You are in a very, as a country, privileged position, because I think that Nigeria alone get for like over 80% of the fintech investments, in the whole continent. Mm-hmm. It has been the case for many years. Now it's getting a little bit more balanced. What is your own personal take? I generally want you to know that Africa has different speeds, right? In terms of pure ecosystems, right? And what I call frontiers market are a little bit out of the radar, in terms of investments. There are very little technological solution. Mm-hmm. Financial inclusion, they have a mobile phone, but basically that's it. Mm-hmm. So what do you think would be how do you see the evolution of this frontiers market? Do you see, for example, more mature market like Nigeria through partnerships, through investment, through I almost want you to take out your hat of CEO of NIBSS and give me your answer as Premier. You see what I mean?
Okay, I'll try to do that. But I think there's a lot going on the African continent right now, a lot of interaction. As you know, Nigerians are very creative and innovative, and we tend to confront various problems that we see on a day-to-day basis and find creative solutions around them and solve those problems for the population. So that gives us a lot of advantage. But now, we're also finding most of these Nigerian fintechs and some Nigerian banks also moving outside Nigeria and establishing in most of the African continent. So one of the deliberate focus, even at NIBSS, like the domestic card we just launched, the name is Afrigo. Mm-hmm. We choose that name specifically because of the continental aspiration. Afrigo.
Can I get an Afrigo card?
Oh, sure, you can. As long as you have a bank account, you can get an Afrigo card from any bank and enjoy the benefits. And one of the things we are doing with Afrigo, if I may just speak to that, is that we are combining payment and identity on one card, working with NIBSS. And once that is done, then you're going to see a huge surge in terms of the number of people holding the national identity card, as well as the payment card, all in one card. These are creative solutions, and then a lot of African countries are in need of all these innovations and so on. And Nigeria is very willing. Some of them have approached us. We've helped a couple of one or two countries to set up, and a lot of others are also talking to us, coming to us, and then understanding what we are doing. The stage where we are right now, NIBSS is ready to partner with any African government or institution to set up their domestic payment system and bring it at par to the modern trend. So you are going to see a whole lot of activities and a lot of Nigerian companies, fintechs, banks, and even switching platforms getting involved in most of the African countries and then helping to upscale payment across Africa, because we need it desperately. The cost of cash is extremely very, very expensive, and if we can digitize the entire process, then it's a lot better for us as Africans and for each country. So we're going to see a trend. that direction.
The beauty of having such a pervasive infrastructure is that you can collect a lot of very insightful data on the consumers, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, do you see, for example, an instant lending or like other products being built on the top of the Africa Go card?
Yes, there is a lot of...
It looks like we prepared this interview, guys, but this is just because, it's so fascinating. It's so fascinating to understand the story that these questions are just spontaneous.
Yeah, of course, we didn't prepare the interview. So there's a lot coming out from Africa. I'm particularly very excited, first of all, as a Nigerian and also as an African. And we are using Africa to solve local problems. So we've launched the debit card. The virtual card is also up and ready to be launched. We've also launched the prepaid card and a lot of other components. Now back to the lending part. We are launching the credit card shortly. And the credit card, will automatically deal with the lending aspect. But the beauty is that we don't have a culture of credit card, but we believe that we can turn that around because there's a lot of payday loan activities right now in the country. And if people have credit card, I personally believe that if I'm a bus conductor, I have a daily payment in the evening, and I can get a 2,000 or 5,000 naira credit card, which means that I can eat in the morning, eat in the evening, and this will also help improve commerce within the country. So you don't need to earn before you eat. So if I'm a security man, low-level employee, you have a credit card. And remember, with the bank verification number, the BVN, we can find anybody. The NIN is also tied to accounts now. The Central Bank of Nigeria in December mandated all banks to tie the NIN, the National Identity Number, and the BVN to every account. What that means is that we can find anybody within the ecosystem. So you're going to see an increased use of credit card on the Afrigo rail to promote lending within the country.
Final question, Premier. You've been at the festival for 4 years. So how did you see evolving, even in terms of like the Africa presence at the festival? You know that GFTN is very focused on Africa, as you know. And I know because I've seen you in our different gatherings. So, on the point of view of a strategic player in the continent, how do you see this cross-fertilization, of ecosystems by Africa having a presence at the Singapore Fintech Festival?
I think that cross-presence is very important because nobody achieves success by being an island. And in Africa, where we're doing a whole lot, we also need to learn from the outside world what is going on. And the outside world also needs to hear of the Nigerian story and the African story. Yesterday, I spoke at a group, and then a lot of the participants were shocked with the kind of information they obtained as to what is happening in Nigeria, which means that the awareness is not really there. So coming here is an opportunity to showcase what NIBSS is doing to help digital transformation with respect to payments in Nigeria and ultimately the African continent. And then on the year-to-year basis, you see more and more increasing participation from African countries. A lot of central bank governors are here at this section. A lot of other African companies are here. And then there's a lot of new products, sharing of ideas, people wanting to get into Africa, as well as them coming over to learn some of the things that we are also doing to see how, I expect that some softwares and applications will also be exported to some of these countries. And there's a lot of interactions going on, mutual respect, great ideas. I just mentioned about the instant credit on the POS machine, which is the first in the world. A lot of participants yesterday were shocked that such a thing could emerge from Africa. So I think there's a lot more, and I hope that in future events, I've seen the Fintech Festival increase on the yearly basis, number of participants and number of countries present here, increasing on a year-to-year basis. And I think in future, You must also find some African nations and central bank taking stands here, and then showcase some of the valuable products and things that we're doing to also help other parts of the world and the nation. So,
we are actually in this, beside this podcast is the pavilion of nations, and
Yes.
I really look forward to have more African stands, and I'm sure that is going to happen. By the way, guys, I am profoundly convinced that Africa will lead the financial inclusion and the fintech innovation in the coming years, and I believe that this conversation with Premier is a great witness of that. Premier, thank you very much for being with us.
Before you round up,
by all means,
I would like to mention that you're absolutely correct when you said Africa will lead a lot of innovation. I don't know if you've heard of the concept of the USSD payment.
Yes, I do.
So, that was an African technology.
Of course.
So yesterday at the group I spoke to, it's already been adopted in some other parts of the world, because to achieve financial inclusion, not everybody has a digital phone. So there are lots of positive things coming out of Africa, coming out of Nigeria, based on our use cases of, let's say, challenges that have to be solved. And I know Africa is a green bed. It's a very fertile ground for a lot of innovation, a lot of activities. And I think anyone that can focus on Africa right now, focus on Nigeria specifically, if you really want to challenge any product, I think the best place you can achieve that challenge is Nigeria. You come into Nigeria, people will help you. We call it panel beating. We reshape products in NIBSS and in Nigeria to make it a lot better and localize the products, which of course ultimately spread across Africa.
We hear you, Premier. Guys, it was an immense pleasure to have you, Premier, in this CXO podcast. Thanks a lot for sharing your insights with us.
Thank you very much. Thanks
and
for having me.
it's a wrap. Hey guys, welcome back to Breaking Banks Europe at Singapore Fintech Festival, powered by the CXO Conversation. Thanks once again for hosting us. I'm here with Jo Ann Barefoot, CEO and founder of the Alliance for Innovative Regulation. And it's not the first time we are hosting you, Jo Ann, at Breaking Banks. So welcome back.
Thank you. Nice to be back.
Jo Ann, you and I go back a long way,
We do.
And we met, I want to say, a few years ago when I was thinking about it this morning. We always describe the different pillars of the ecosystems, and we say, the regulator is always the missing one. Everyone was dealing with startups and banks and, technology players and investors, of course. And I remember vividly that all the keynote influencers, whatever, they open up their speech saying, and the regulator is missing. I think that you guys, if I can put you in that family, which of course I can, came back a long way, don't you think?
Absolutely. I'm a former bank regulator myself, and my feeling on this is if the regulators don't get their part right, nothing else gets optimized. So that's what we work on.
So tell us a little bit about your story and how you ended up at this super cool company title that you have found. Tell us a bit your story.
So I have worked for decades, mainly in consumer financial protection, financial inclusion. I've worked for the U.S. Senate. I was deputy controller of the currency in the United States. Did a lot in the consulting world through the years. Always working on regulatory issues around those challenges and also financial crime. And about 10 or 12 years ago, I really started looking at the emergence of new tech and fintech, realizing that it could solve problems that have never been solvable in finance, and especially on the impact on the consumer. And I did a 2-year senior fellowship at Harvard a number of years back and was researching these issues. How is technology changing consumer finance, and how should we regulate it? And I just had an epiphany that we're going to regulate it wrong because our regulatory system is not designed to deal with rapid change, mold-breaking change like we have now. So at the risk of sounding grandiose, I appointed myself to work on that problem. and then founded a nonprofit, AIR, and we're working all over the world with regulators and in the regulatory ecosystem to try to bring the technology to the table for regulators to use and to help them understand how the markets that they're overseeing are changing.
You and I see each other a lot in emerging markets. I'm sure that I met you at least in Southeast Asia, Africa, and Latin America more than once.
Yeah.
If you had to explain in simple words, why is regulation so important for emerging markets? Because everyone would understand that in complex economies, Western economies, everyone understands the different roles, right? And how does it change the role of regulators in emerging markets?
Yeah, that's such a great question, because the first thing is we've been through now more than a decade of realizing that once everybody had a mobile phone in their hand, we had the opportunity for a whole new way of delivering mainstream financial services to everyone instead of just through bank branches and, expensive old models. And so there's been, as you know, spectacular success in that financial inclusion, especially in payments, far from perfect, not complete, but completely revolutionizing. Hundreds and hundreds of millions of people have been brought into the formal financial system through the phone. That required a certain amount of regulatory attention to be sure that was being done right. But now you say to yourself, if you have hundreds of millions of new customers receiving financial services, you have to protect them from the bad things that can come through that phone. The scams, the fraud, the over-indebtedness. There's a government role that has to come right behind inclusion to be thinking about what are the protection issues. So we're doing a lot of work on that. We have a tech sprint going right now in West Africa under a grant from the Gates Foundation, working on payments fraud and consumer protection in West Africa. We're working all over the world on these kinds of consumer protection issues.
And I almost wanted to, add on or allow myself to double click on one thing that you mentioned. The fact that the mobile phone becomes the point of entry, it also means that there is a variety of new type of data, that are coming to play. And, I always, as you know, I'm a coach and a mentor to a gazillion of startups in the past 20 years since the Swift times. And I still remember at the beginning, the very early credit scoring models that were analyzing from the behavioral on how fast you type an address or your own name on your phone, up to, the payments or like how many ticket buses you buy with a little tap and go thingy, even in Africa. So how disruptive is, for a regulator all of a sudden being invaded, by all these new type of data and making sense of them?
Absolutely. And this is true for emerging markets regulators and everyone else. The huge transformation here is that information has become digitized, is rapidly becoming, and we have new ways to analyze it, particularly with artificial intelligence. And if you think about that from the lens of a regulator and a risk manager, the revolution is massive increase in the opportunity for transparency. Regulators are trying to scan the system they're supposed to oversee and ask what's going wrong. Who's violating the law? Who's doing something that's risky? What is a new trend that's emerging? What are the new scams or frauds that may be emerging? What are the new threats to privacy? And the old-fashioned regulatory approach had a lot of trouble getting that clear picture, that transparency, because the information has been fragmented. It was on paper, or it was locked in some old database that didn't communicate with anything else. All of that is becoming accessible, and not a minute too soon, because the financial system is becoming more and more dynamic, more and more innovative, full of good opportunities, but full of risks also. And the regulators need better tools. They need that visibility into the system. If you think back to the financial crisis, that started in the U.S. subprime mortgage field and turned into a global recession, Great Recession. We probably could have avoided that if the regulators had had better ability to see the contagion that was developing early on in those markets that led to the cascading of risk throughout the world.
You remarkably sort of combined your huge experience in the field with, I almost want to say, a fresh mindset approach by not only not reinventing, you didn't need to reinvent yourself, but you reinvent the way you approach your profession, right? If you allow me to say so. But when I usually see the average age of central bank governors and most of their direct reports, they don't look exactly like young entrepreneurs, right? Or millennials.
Yeah.
And so this is like the first fact, which everyone would agree with. And I want to combine this with the fact that on day one at Singapore Fintech Festival, I moderated the whole talent day, and we had a session of 50 students that went on a program called Blockchain Guardians that was all about compliance and Web3, and digital assets. So how complicated is today for a regulator to attract the right type of talents? And, where do you even study this stuff, right? So if you don't have 20 years of experience and you want to help a regulator to innovate, don't you think there is a bit of a disconnect?
I do, although sometimes it's good not to have 20 years of experience if you bring in some fresh eyes to these things. Yeah, I feel comfortable in saying as a baby boomer that we need a generational turnover here, and we need the elder senior members in the field to be learning. Somebody asked me the other day, we're talking 36 hours after the US election, but before the election, someone asked me my thinking on agency heads in a new administration. And I said, if I was the president of the United States, I would have a litmus test that every agency head should be tech forward, or at least not tech backwards. They should understand that tech is changing everything we're doing. And no matter what your age or experience, you need to be leaning forward. I think that we can attract talent so the knock-on regulatory work, financial stuff sounds boring to some people, regulation sounds boring to nearly everyone, but good tech people are attracted to difficult problems and important problems. And financial regulation is loaded with difficult, challenging, and important problems. And I think if we package these opportunities in that way and if we make it easier for people to kind of go in and out of government, you and I know so many founders who reach a point in their career where they could go into government and spend a few years, as long as the rules won't prevent them from, keeping their gains that they've been able to win. But I think we need to. Millennials are the largest generation in the history of the world, and they are all digitally native, and they're reaching a point where they're taking over more and more leadership, both in the marketplace and in the workplace. And so it'll naturally work its way through, but we should do everything we can to accelerate it.
So it is too tempting, you mentioned the US election, there are one day that it's been one day that the world is, playing with the news. And of course, I want to touch an aspect that is factual, so it will allow us not to get, heated on whatever side we could get heated on. And is the digital asset regulation.
Yeah.
So what? And I'm telling, and I'm two facts. So one, because everything that has happened, in 2 days, Bitcoin reached, his peak. We wonder why. But also at the same time, in Italy, my home country, they just decided to tax 42%, crypto profits, which sort of dragged down all the innovation around it, the good, not just a pure speculation sort of mindset, but also all the innovation that comes with, the digital asset solutions. This is also a brand new field, right?
It's so young, yeah.
Exactly. So how much extra work is required today? This is another gap we are talking about right here.
Regulators aren't built to deal with mold-breaking change, and probably the best example is crypto and digital assets, where it just hasn't fit neatly into the boxes that we've had, and it's so complex, and there is so much potential for abuse. We've seen crime, we've seen scams in that field, and yet so much potential for making the system work better in so many ways. The United States regulation of crypto has been very complex. We have a very complex financial regulatory system. And as you say, it could be with the new US election, we'll see some major changes in that. I hope they will be bipartisan. I hope we won't run into a situation where somehow there's a perception that digital assets are favored by one party and disfavored by the other, because what we really need, back to the importance of regulation, we need regulatory guardrails and frameworks that can unlock the upside potential of these kinds of innovations and still protect against big harm being done. And it's not simple. Not simple. We're working our way through it.
It isn't. Today is the last day of the Singapore Fintech Festival. Do you want to share maybe one conversation that you had in these 3 days that sort of is probably going to last? I mean, you certainly have many of them, but if you want to highlight one or two, and it could be like a session that you have attended or a natural conversation that you want to share without getting into any details that you don't want to, but because I would know, I asked myself that question, and I know you're a great also improviser, because that's how great minds work. So I'm pretty sure that you can find something you want to share.
Yeah, you didn't warn me you were going to ask that, and it is a hard question because there are so many. And I want to put in a pitch for people to come to this festival from around the world. The fact that the Singapore Fintech Festival was founded by a central bank, of all things, makes it really unique in the world, as in addition to being, I think, the largest financial conference in the world. And I just wish even more people would come, although, what do we have, like 70,000 people here or something like that?
Exactly.
Having said that, I'll tell you the first thing that leaped to my mind when you asked the question, Matteo, was we had a wonderful session yesterday on payments and financial inclusion. And it included both Rwanda and Ghana. And we had Kwame Apong from Ghana, and they were talking about the opportunity to really drive financial inclusion through easier cross-border payments. And I'll tell you, they were both so passionate, thoughtful, deeply sophisticated in understanding the challenges, but charismatic, and they had infectious optimism that we can do so much better for people. If in their case, they're trying to put together a bilateral approach, and I know you've been very active in both places, to figure out how do we do the government part of this to enable the private sector to serve people better, to make cross-border payments more affordable, more feasible, less friction filled, and then drive economic opportunity through that. I'm going to invite the two of them on my podcast show, see if I can get them to come on. But that was one of the ones that really has stayed with me from the week. They're so exciting. And back to the emerging markets, there's so much going on in emerging markets that is leading the way, partly because maybe financial regulators in emerging markets are a little more attuned to the upside opportunities of if we really get the new technology driving change. It's exciting to be here.
It's fascinating because you just made me think of something. In Africa, the big difference that I see compared with Western economies is that the line of the actual doers in central bankers are in their early 30s.
Yes, these are young people.
Right?
Brilliant young people.
Isn't that incredible?
Yes, yeah.
Which is very different because the line 1 and line 2, like in the Italian regulator, they are all older than me and are not exactly young, right? But and I'm saying this because yesterday we were here we have this format called Ecosystem Zoom In, where we take a country and we explore fintech in that particular landscape. Yeah. And we got the Central Bank of Namibia, and there were two ladies in their 30s, I want to say. And one was the innovation lead, fintech lead in the central bank that per se is already very, in Namibia, super interesting. Yeah. And the other was the payment, head, and the fact that I'm really hopeful that this young talent, as the discussion you were mentioning, will really progress.
Yeah, I am too. I'm very optimistic. It's hard. You have to be patient and optimistic to work on changing regulatory things of any kind. But if you get the regulatory part right and the market and technology change is able to flower within, again, the appropriate controls, you can change everything. We can solve problems that have been with us for as long as we've had money, right? And certainly as long as we've had credit and as long as we've had payment mechanisms, there have always been problems of people being left out or victimized in different ways. And today's technology can solve we're never going to have perfection, but we can have so much better a system if we get all the pieces right and holistically working together.
We are going to wrap up, but I want to shout out to Jo Ann podcast. What's the title of the podcast?
My podcast is called Barefoot Innovation, and I want to have you on, Matteo, soon.
Oh, thank you. The invite accepted, but I saw it on LinkedIn. I remember the Barefoot because you have a super cool family name. So I knew that Barefoot was in the title, but I didn't know so the name is the Barefoot
Innovation. It's
Barefoot Innovation
channel.
Yep. Yeah, it's a very cool one. Congratulations even for the name.
Thank you. We have a lot of fun with it.
Jo Ann, it was indeed fun to have this podcast. Thank you for the CXO Conversation and the Singapore Fintech Festival to host this episode of Breaking Banks Europe. Thank you, Jo Ann, for being with us.
Thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure.
And it's a wrap.
Thanks for listening to Breaking Banks Europe, a Provoke Media podcast in cooperation with Fintech Stage. Don't forget to tweet us out, shout out, or post to the team at Breaking Banks EU on Twitter. If there's something or someone you'd like to hear on our cast, let us know. See you next week on Breaking Banks Europe.